Al-Islam, the universal religion, the salvation of all humanity.
If you say the words black Muslims to white Americans who remember the 60s, this may be the image that comes to mind. It was an angry era. A time of racial tension and division. Along with slogans about black power, some people were using the religious language of Islam.
Assalamu alaikum. Greet my brothers and sisters in our original language, which is the Arabic language, which means may peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.
The organization known as the Nation of Islam had been around since the 1930s, but it gained widespread attention in 1967 when a young boxer refused to be inducted into the U.S. Army. He said it was against the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to fight in a white man's war. He said he would give up the title of heavyweight champion of the world rather than go against the teachings of the Nation of Islam.
I know that there are many people who've been following my image and my little name in the sports world for the past 15 years now. When I was Cassius Clay, I could not talk. When I was Cassius Clay, I was just we might say Uncle Tom, so-called Negro, looking one day to be married to a nice white blonde, living in the hills in California with the rest of the brothers that I know that are up there today. Now that I've accepted the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the beautiful name that he has given me, Muhammad Ali, I now have a wise teacher.
In the name of Allah, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, and in the name of his last, his greatest messenger, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, Salaam alaikum. Today we would like to inform the world that there is no leadership crisis in the Nation of Islam.
But there was a crisis in 1975. Elijah Muhammad, who set the nation's tone and philosophy, was dead.
And the Nation of Islam had chosen Minister Wallace D. Muhammad as the spiritual and administrative leader of the Nation of Islam.
But W.D. Muhammad was never comfortable with his father's views. Eventually, he renounced the Nation of Islam. He urged his followers to come with him to the universal community of Islam, and most have. Minister Louis Farrakhan leads those who remain. The Darrington unit of the Texas Department of Correction is a maximum security prison near Houston. For years, it was notorious, even among Texas prisons, for the violence within its walls. During one 5-month period in 1985, 5 inmates were murdered by other inmates. On a sweltering day, this can be a nightmarish place. From the factories where old tires are recapped, to the living quarters known as the tanks.
This is home. Temporary.
The only quiet place is the chapel, where on Fridays, Muslim prisoners gather for prayer. Every one of the inmates here today converted to Islam while in prison. There's a similar pattern at prisons around the country. People enter as criminals and leave as Muslims. Warden Keith Price.
All of a sudden, here was a minority inmate that was living in a system that very shortly before he'd been in combat against. Something made a difference. The only thing I could see that made a difference in those people's lives was the fact that they became Islamic.
The most famous prison convert is Malcolm X. He joined the Nation of Islam in Norfolk Prison in Massachusetts in the early 50s. But the Muslims at Darrington say there's a big difference between the black supremacy Malcolm advocated then and what they practice now.
I don't see that picture of Islam at all now in the 60s, but we're talking about, 3 decades later. I mean, that's not the picture of Islam that I see today.
Back then, Muslim prisoners were kept isolated at one penitentiary. Now there are Muslims throughout the Texas system, and also official Muslim chaplains.
Can I get the chaplain, please? He said if he was
Imam Eugene Farouk has a policy. He doesn't ask inmates what they're doing in a maximum security prison.
Sometimes if you find out, that might affect the way that you deal with that person, So to avoid even having to deal with that, in most cases I don't ask why they're there.
Like Muslims anywhere in the world, the inmates do a ritual washing before praying. The service proceeds as Friday prayer would anywhere in the world until it's time for the count.
As far as prison regulations go, when it's time to count, it's time to count. And everything stops for the count. So those are some of the things that that's one of the realities of prison.
Accept the realities of prison, Imam Farouk tells the inmates. Commit yourself to the discipline of Islam. And he says, accept the support that comes from fellow Muslims. When Basil Abdullah got out of prison, like many ex-offenders, he found it hard to get a job. So he formed his own company. What do you call your company?
Dr. J, Intensive Care, Landscaping. I'm a doctor. That's right.
Now he and other former inmates, all of them Muslim, have created a network of lawn care companies in Houston. Part of what they earn, they set aside for zakat. Zakat, or charity, is the third of the 5 pillars of Islam, the 5 practices common to Muslims the world over.
Most people say charity, but zakat, in our understanding, is broader than just feeding the hungry. Our understanding, the human being just don't need money. He needs guidance. That's the most important thing he needs, because you can have a whole lot of money and still be on crack.
In the neighborhood where Abdullah grew up, he found plenty of drugs and very little guidance. Now he and some of the other Muslims have gone back to the old neighborhood, and with zakat money, they've bought an abandoned house.
Matter of fact, it was a crack house, and we made it into a center, for the worship of Allah. I was a heroin addict. I was on methadone, pills, Christmas trees, nuggets as they call them, tranquilizers. I was doing all that, And
Is that how you landed in jail?
Yeah, I was involved in a murder.
He was 20 years old and he was sentenced to 99 years.
That was a turning point in my life, you know, and I don't regret, you know, I regret being in that situation where a person's life was taken, but I don't regret going, experiencing some of the things I experienced, you know, in that confinement or in that restricted area, because in that area I became a man, you know, and a free man, you know, thinking wise.
He became a Muslim in jail. He was released 9 years ago, and he stayed straight.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Good morning, good afternoon. Wow. We're back at Carver Park in Acreage Home off of Carver Road. And as I look around, over 40 years ago, this is where it all began. We say Masjid Taleem Muhammad now, but it was first Taleem Muhammad. And we started out in this park, establishing Salatul Jummah with the hope of establishing a masjid in this area or in Acreage Home, or either in then we call Studewood, which is now Independent Heights. But inshallah, you can see this is the park where it was known as one of the most dangerous parks in Houston. That's when Houston had the murder capital of the United States, beat Chicago and New York and all LA, all those big cities. You know, that wasn't nothing to be happy about, but this is where it all began. Our President Bush
targeting $50 million to fight crime in public housing projects.
Started the war on drugs.
I'm proposing that we more than double federal assistance to state and local law enforcement.
And so many people had got killed in this park that year.
Americans have a right to safety in and around their homes.
That's when crack was first coming out.
This is crack cocaine.
But we, as believers, Muslims, we established Salatul Jummah on this particular basketball court. And you can see now these oak trees have grown up, but that's been over about 38, 40 years ago. So I'm coming back to have a look at back then, and then God willing, we will show you some videos to bring you up to date, to see whether or not we were successful in our venture to establish a masjid for the sake of Allah in this community. So you will be watching a series of videos showing you the progress, the evolution from right here out in the environment and to a house of worship now called Masjid Taleem Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum.